Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ira Mihal, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Emory University. Before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping announcements for today's session. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in the Learning Development webinars and programs are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or views of Emory University, the Emory Alumni Association, or its affiliates. The content provided in the program is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement by Emory University or the Alumni Association. This session is being recorded, so please keep your microphones muted to avoid distractions. If you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to share them in the chat box. Now, this is the fun part for me. I'm excited to introduce our featured speakers, Samantha Carroll and Annette Bloom-Pearson. Samantha and Annette rely on their experience as corporate and entrepreneurial leaders, board advisors, executive coaches, and strategic consultants to connect ambitious executives to professional growth opportunities. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them now and let them tell you a little bit more about themselves. Sam and Annette.
Good morning. We can start with our bios if you'd like, and then move into the rest of our presentation. So Samantha, why don't I kick it off to you first?
Sure. Well, first of all, we're so happy to be here with everyone, and thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us today. I am the CEO and principal consultant of Once Upon a Brand. Once Upon a Brand is a PRSA award-winning communications and brand strategy consultancy. We advise growth stage and mature stage clients on the nonprofit and the for-profit side. And I also work with C-suite executives on executive communications as they are looking for expanded roles, such as board positions or to expand their thought leadership. I am honored to also be a communications advisor with the Emory University Advancement in Alumni Engagement. And I co-founded Light Her Way with Annette Bloom-Pearson, which we'll tell you a little bit more about today, which is a leadership program and community. And I really enjoy just sharing information, knowledge, resources, and connections with various communities like NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, Georgetown University, Emory, George Washington University, and I also serve on a nonprofit board and a couple of advisory panels. I'll throw it over to Annette.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So the first thing to note is that Samantha and I are both Emory alumni. We met our freshman year at Emory and reconnected somewhat recently to form this coalition to support women in their career and professional development. I am living in San Francisco, as I said in the chat. I am the founder and lead coach for Annette Bloom-Pearson Coaching and Consulting, along with being the co-founder of Light Her Way. Since graduating from business school in 2010, I spent over a decade in the tech world doing product management and marketing. I've supported entrepreneurs, cross-functional teams, and leadership executives to drive large-scale initiatives that cultivate thriving and successful organizations. I was certified as a coach by the International Coaching Federation, and I also serve on the board of the International Coaching Federation Foundation as a trustee. I also serve on the board of the UCLA Anderson Alumni Board of Directors, and I work closely with the Anderson Alumni, UCLA Alumni, and Emory Alumni Associations as a professional coach. I work as a mentor and a coach for Girls with Impact. I advise a second degree society and have contributed to Creative Mornings and other organizations that are bringing content and information to people who are building their careers and their lives in a values-driven way. So we will now move into our program. I think everyone saw our initial slide asking for not just your name and location, but what brings you to the table, what interests you in board service. And we encourage you to share your LinkedIn profile in order to connect with others on the call as well. So this year, I just want to say happy International Women's Day to everyone. We know it was a couple days ago officially, but this entire month is a celebration of amazing women doing all sorts of things to better the world. This year, the theme is Accelerate Action, highlighting strategies, resources, and initiatives that drive progress for women around the world. The campaign encourages stakeholders to implement effective measures to improve opportunities for women in various sectors, reinforcing commitment to sustainable and equitable development, which, as we know, is lagging compared to where it should be. Did you know that International Women's Day was established in 1977 by the UN to work towards equity and to promote change for women? We still have a really long way to go to achieve equal representation and impact in organizations and in the boardroom. So we're thrilled that all of you are here so that we can drive your success in the boardroom and beyond.
Thank you so much. We're going to go into our agenda briefly, and then we'll get into the meat of why we're here today. We know we have a little less than an hour, and we do have a lot to cover. So we will be moving fairly quickly. We encourage any questions to go in the chat, and we will follow up at the end for a little bit of Q&A. I hope we have some time. And then we can also follow up privately with anyone if we need to. We'll be starting today by exploring what board service even is, and a high-level look at different board structures. And then we're going to talk through a little bit about how you can start to position yourself for a board role. We'll talk about why your network is so important and strategic ways that you can think about building it with your eye on the ball of joining a board. And then we'll hopefully end up with some Q&A, and we will definitely end up with some resources for you. So we're going to talk through what does a board do. Let's sort of level set and get an understanding of what the purpose is. So the very first thing is that boards are there existing to provide oversight and guidance to management. So they're considering various internal and external factors affecting the organization. The second thing is that they're there to promote the organization's values, vision, and mission, and act in the interest of all of these ideals. Third, they assist in identifying the organization's priorities. So that's a big one, and thinking through the high-level challenges or opportunities that may be associated with those priorities. At the end of the day, corporate boards really exist to represent the shareholders' best and long-term interests. And so you could say that nonprofit boards do as well if you consider the end users of the nonprofit to be the stakeholders or the members. A board manages and mitigates risks and provides governance for all stakeholders. And then last but not least, they are there really also to protect human and technological assets. And so boards oversee finances and investments, helping to ensure the financial health of the organization and the sustainability of the organization.
All right. So the word governance has come up a couple of times as we talk about what boards do and their function, both in a corporate and a nonprofit setting. Governance is a collection of control mechanisms, or it can be considered a system of checks and balances that an organization adopts to prevent management and other employees from acting in their own self-interests at the expense of the organization and its stakeholders. Excuse me, depending on whether or not this organization is for profit, the shareholders and donors, or nonprofit, the shareholders and the stakeholders are a little bit different, but everyone relies on governance, being able to set rules, provide accountability, and keep structure around how a board functions, and in turn, how the organization functions and succeeds. So we're going to be looking at 3 high-level categories into which boards fall: nonprofit, corporate public, and corporate private. The primary difference between a nonprofit board and a corporate board is their focus. A corporate board prioritizes maximizing profits for shareholders, while a nonprofit board focuses on fulfilling the organization's mission and serving the community, often with a greater emphasis on social impact instead of financial gain. This difference is reflected in their accountability, the funding sources of the organization, and board member motivations. So this is a bit of a busy slide, and I will say it's almost impossible to create a comprehensive board structure matrix. But we're sharing this overview to give some insight into which type of board might be best suited for you during different phases of your career and your life. So some of the differences and similarities are going to be covered. And as we mentioned, please put any questions or thoughts that you have in the chat so we can address them at the end of the session or in between slides. The structure of a nonprofit board is composed of staff, board members, volunteers, and donors. Generally, board members are expected to steer clear of operational activities in order to preserve the difference between management and leadership in the board of directors. Depending, though, on the size of the nonprofit, there may be times when the board does engage in operational or boots on the ground work. A nonprofit or an association is known for having a unique form of collaborative governance, where volunteer leaders and staff leaders share responsibility for advancing the organization. All too often, this has led to complex and slow-moving structures with constituency-based governing in decisions made through consensus building, as opposed to fast decisions made by a more hierarchical, for lack of a better word, board. It's essential that a board of directors take responsibility for setting the long-term strategic direction of the organization. And each diverse member of the board and leadership team is expected to bring a unique set of skills. This diversity that they bring can be in their experience and ideas to enhance overall success, financial health, and the longevity of the organization. A nonprofit board is also tracking the health of the organization by providing oversight and ensuring resource sustainability, i.e., ensuring that money is flowing into the organization through donors and other such methods. The board is there to advance the mission and the vision and the collective purpose of the nonprofit. The board, finally, is there to address and reflect the needs and diversity of the community being served. They are also there to establish trust within that community. The time commitment of a nonprofit board member really varies, depending on the services provided by the organization, the availability and interest of the board member, and the size of the organization and the scope. There can be varying levels of involvement, and that is really up to the organization as they bring board members on and the agreement that they make. Typically, most nonprofit board positions are unpaid and are on a volunteer basis. However, sometimes there is actually a financial commitment, otherwise known as pay to play. People other times can gain seats on a board because of their commitment to that organization, whether it is through volunteering or long-time service through another method where they have added value to that nonprofit. So this slide looks somewhat similar, and I am just going to share a little bit of time to do a check-in. If you have any burning questions about board structures, whether it's nonprofit or corporate, let's take 30 seconds to put them in the chat or speak up so that we can make sure that we're answering these questions as we go. Anyone have any questions specifically about the structure or the expectations of different types of boards?
We have a question in the chat. Crystal is asking, are there any common guidelines on the size of a board, especially those for corporate entities?
So I'm not sure if you're asking if a board needs to be a certain size depending on the type of organization that it serves. I think there are, I don't think, there are definitely guidelines depending on the type of organization and the size of organization that you serve, as well as the industry that it's in, because there will be more positions or more committees that are necessary depending on the scope of financial information that's necessary, security information, industry expertise, and things like that. But that's something that we can definitely spend a little more time on in a follow-up. We are not necessarily speaking to how boards are formed in this presentation, but more how different people might fit into a board and add value in that sense. So happy to follow up with you, Crystal, if you are on a board or if you're forming a board for a company that you advise or that you've founded. So happy to stay connected. Samantha, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that was great.
Okay. All right. So speaking of corporate boards, we see that the scope is the same or very, very similar to what we discussed for a nonprofit. So in a private board or a public board, the scope of that board is to ensure that companies represent the interest of their owners or stockholders or shareholders. Some private organizations may maintain a two-tier structure in order to separate management and supervisory boards. In this case, the boards may not have access to the same information, and generally that's for legal reasons, to keep them distinct in case there is private information that has confidentiality needs. In a family-owned business, they often have their own unique board structure, so there can be some variation in terms of the responsibilities and experience and expectations there as well. Across corporations, as similarly to nonprofit, boards help set the strategic direction, assist with appointing the executive team, set goals, and replace executives if they fail to meet the expectations that have been set for them. A board is responsible for providing unbiased perspectives on issues brought to them in order to broaden the thinking beyond management's perspective, to ensure transparency, accountability, and ethical conduct, which is really, really important. They share in some of the risk and provide insights into decisions that a company is making. Both private and public boards advise on scale and sustainability to bolster and protect the financial health of the company, as well as to provide guidance on the technological and digital goals, potential mergers and acquisitions, or large-scale change initiatives. And finally, they bring perspective on culture and talent development. The time commitment for a private board can be quarterly, if not more regular board meetings. So it could range between 5 to 25 hours per quarter. The time allotted really depends on the size of the board, the committees that someone is a part of, the size of the organization, and the idiosyncrasies of that particular board. And we have to remember that it's not just the meetings and prep for the meetings that you are accounting for in the time commitment, but also all of the prep you do for your specific committee meetings, the committee meetings that you attend, any working sessions that you're part of, and the work you do behind the scenes, if that is part of your expectations. Median compensation for private board membership, according to a global study by Idastone Global, is around $42,000 per year, while a public company board can pay up to $300,000 per year with additional perks, depending on the size of the organization, how it's traded, and the scope of the board expectations. Board seats for private and public companies are generally sourced through recommendations. There are boards that have an application process, but we will say that most board seats are gotten through recommendations, referrals, and who you know. We know that over 2/3 of board seats are not posted publicly. So the recommendation and referral system is critical if you're interested in a board seat. And they are, once a board member has been submitted as a potential member, once someone has been submitted as a potential member, these elections are done by the corporate shareholders to make the final decision.
Yeah. So when we look at all of the differences between boards and we think about all of the information, and there's a lot in terms of the time commitment and who they're looking for, we've come up with a couple of sort of key areas to help you as you're thinking about positioning yourself for a board, or you're just even trying to understand what boards are looking for. So in terms of board priorities, one of the first things is governance. So that makes a lot of sense. So in business, governance is the system of rules, processes, and practices that guide and control the company. So it's a really broad concept, but it includes all of those tasks that basically help a business stay on track. So if you have had any governance experience, whether it's within your company or a community group, or any kind of, extracurricular group, that's important to bring out and to highlight. So what experiences have really demonstrated your ability to think strategically, and how could you, bring all of those processes or practices in your strategic thinking to this new group? And then the next one is that boards are looking for diversity, but they're looking in a really broad sense. So when we think about diversity, we tend to think about maybe diversity of culture, diversity of geography, or of background. They are also looking for diversity of age, experience, thought processes, ideas, and then finally, relationship building. So what kind of a network, what kind of alliances can you then bring and offer to a board environment, and how might that be beneficial to the shareholders or to the stakeholders of that organization. Sometimes we think that if our experience doesn't match perfectly to an industry of that board, it means we're not a good fit. But boards actually want and ultimately need a diverse set of insights and opinions. So it can be a real asset that you have experience from, let's say, a complementary industry to that you're trying to join that particular board. They're also looking for an understanding of the finances of an organization. So this is one that sometimes people, kind of gulp loudly at if they don't come from a financial background. And if that is you, then our big key takeaway here is you don't necessarily need to know the very, very complicated inner workings of the financial statements, but you absolutely need to be knowledgeable about the components of the financial statements, how one may affect another, and how they affect the organization on the whole. So whether they're going through a big growth period, whether they're going through a downsizing, what are the tax implications? So looking at those financial statements and being able to tell a bit of the story. And then really another aspect of financial understanding is knowing the right questions to ask of the financial experts who do know what each of the specific terms may mean or numbers may mean on that financial statement. Next down, we have understanding of topical issues. So of course, we want to have a really good understanding of topical issues that may impact that board, of local, regional, global issues that board may be facing or may face in the future, so that we can be a little bit predictive in our behaviors. What are the hot topics of the day? So are they going to impact the scale and sustainable business when it comes to kind of strategic prioritization? And looking at recent studies or recent trends is really helpful in this area. So when we think about going back to what the boards are looking for, it's putting together a picture and showcasing that you can utilize all of these major skill sets in a board position so that you can come in and be really successful in that role. When we kind of further dig into the benefit of diverse boards, we can see that studies have actually shown that when women specifically join boards, financial outcomes improve. One reason diverse boards are associated with organizational success is that boards with greater social, professional, cultural diversity are considering multiple perspectives of a wider range of the population. So their viewpoint is broadened. Being more inclusive allows for better ideas, for new strategies, for other recommendations maybe we never thought about. And then it also helps attract and recruit other diverse members. We know, for example, that when women are on boards, the propensity for other women to join those boards or to be pulled in or sponsored goes up. Finally, it expands the potential for new conversations, for updated policies. So that sense of diversity and all of the different meanings that we talked about are really a huge benefit to boards, whether it's nonprofit boards or for-profit boards. According to several recent studies, actually, companies with multiple women board members specifically are more likely to have greater profitability, are more cohesive as a governing body, and are better ESG performers. They have higher returns on equity, they have higher valuations, and they have lower likelihood of shareholder dissent, stronger boardroom relationships, and higher collaboration. So we see there in one instance of the meaning of diversity, what kind of a positive impact there can be. So we're going to go into talking a little bit about positioning yourself for success. So we understand what boards are looking for, and now how do we kind of apply that? And yeah, Annette, if you want to flip to the next slide, what we're going to do is really we want to start with going back to having this really clear, solid understanding of the major issues of that organization or industry. So in order to be able to address challenges, we really need to think about what are all of those challenges regionally, globally, that organization or that industry is facing. So that's the first thing, is just having a really solid understanding of the major issues. Then we want to think about identifying your why, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about or maybe done some exercises around, but we want to really align that why with board service. And so it can be a little bit different. And for those who may not be familiar with what a why or a why statement is, it's really a values-driven statement about what gets you up in the morning, why you engage in certain work, what the value of that engagement is to you, and also to others. So we can think about it a little bit differently than we would think about it for professional work. So for example, I could say I have a certain set of values that drive me to do certain work in the communications industry, or maybe someone else in the finance or tech sector. When I'm thinking of board service, it may be altered a bit. Let's say if I'm working with a nonprofit, so maybe that nonprofit is impacting me, but in a really personal way. So maybe they're focused on healthcare or education, or I've always had a really big passion for a certain area that I want to be able to use my expertise for to further that certain mission. If it's for corporate reasons, again, that why may change a little bit, right? Depending on the value that I feel I can lend to that particular board. When we think about the next one down, that middle line, experiences to value, what we want to do is think about the potential outcomes we could have on a certain board and the audiences that we're directing our messages to. So how do I align my experiences that I've had to all of those experiences on my resume, and then to the actual value that I've provided to organizations and that I could provide to a board? So I'm thinking ahead about how to apply all of the experiences and value in a perspective position that's really going to lead and be in charge of governance for the future of that organization. And next, we want to think about building your brand. So you may have heard of executive brand or personal brand, and we want to start communicating about your UVP, which stands for unique value proposition. And that's really applicable to a board seat. So we want to think about this UVP, and we want to then grow our network so that they understand what unique qualities we're bringing to this particular role. So, we're also really trying to grow our network of those in the industry where the board is. So maybe different board directors. We want to think about companies with boards that you're actually interested in. We want to think about strategically building out those relationships and sharing your interest, because if no one understands or no one knows that you're interested in that particular board seat, as Annette mentioned, 2/3 of these roles are filled within the network. And so it is vitally, vitally important that those around you who are in a place of offering information, offering resources, connecting you to someone else, that we are leveraging all of that network and communicating your unique value so that those individuals can then share that impact throughout their networks as well.
Absolutely. So wanting to go a little bit deeper, about the value and the importance of your network, we really want to think about the fact that other people are our champions. They act as our champions across the board, no pun intended. It's like having an army of messengers out there who advocate for you when you're not in the room. And really, more eyes on the field are simply better. We want to build a force of these opportunity messengers because it's those people who see openings, who hear about openings, and who think of you when there is an opportunity for you to join a board, to have impact, to develop your career, or to simply make a change. Another reason why our networks matter is that the collective wisdom can really increase your understanding and efficacy. So really increasing what you bring to the board in terms of value. As lifelong learners, which all of you are if you're here, you know that the engaging with different people across industries, across roles, across geographies can increase our knowledge. And it increases our knowledge of the things that affect boards. And when we present ourselves as someone who has that diversity of knowledge and that depth of knowledge, we become that much more valuable to the board who is looking to fill a seat. And to that end, it's essential to have people with whom we can share our knowledge, with whom we can share tools and the resources so that we are both growing our impact and we have people who can speak to the impact that we've had on them, on their companies, and on their communities. And finally, our network matters because our network helps us make our best decisions. They can make sure that we're finding the best fit. We work with a lot of women who are interested in board service, both from a nonprofit and a corporate perspective. And we never want someone to accept a board position because it's available. That should be only the door opening to the conversation. When we think about what a board seat entails, we want people who know us and who know that organization to be able to tell us if we would fit into the way that organization functions, how their leadership operates, if certain people would be a good fit for our working style, and if we really would be a match for that board. So not only can our network be our connectors, they can also be our bodyguards when we need to be protected from making a decision that won't serve us in the long run. So just to recap some of the tools and tips that we've gone over today as you consider your road to the boardroom. The first thing that we want to focus on is creating a community of other ambitious leaders who are both confident enough to share opportunities and resources and who are excited about what you bring to the table. You also want to find opportunities to connect with current board members, because that's how we learn what's going on, what opportunities are available, and where there's need. And oftentimes, connecting with a current board member doesn't mean connecting with a board member who serves on a board that you want to serve on, but someone who is serving on any type of board, who also knows other board members, who knows of positions in other companies. These are the people who have their ear to the ground and who are getting information because they're not looking, they're not thirsty, as the kids would say. So they are getting that insight that they want to pass on to people who are really going to be a good fit. Building a board-ready bio and an elevator pitch that is structured specifically to your goals for the boardroom is essential. It's important to this process because oftentimes it's the first impression that people have of you and how you add value to their board. These things, the board bio and the elevator pitch, or even some people use a board resume, are going to be different than the items that you use in your career search and in your career growth. So it's important to look into what makes a board bio, specifically a board bio, and really think about your why for joining a board when you think about your elevator pitch and what it is that you want people to know about who you are and the value you add. Next, you want to know and present your brand extremely well. You need to assess and capitalize on your unique strengths and the value that only you bring to the table. You want to leverage your current relationships with people who know and respect you and continue to continuously expand your network by connecting with those outside of your first and second degree connections. Finally, we highly recommend preparing a roadmap to the boardroom. You want to include measurable actions for creating accountability and structure so that you're able to be thoughtful and to stay focused, even when there are some bumps in the road when you are moving towards achieving your goals. As you make your way towards the boardroom, this roadmap will have some twists and turns, but it will keep you on track to making the impact that you want across industry and across organizations.
Great. So there are, as we mentioned in the beginning, some useful resources we wanted to share with everyone today. One is board readiness programs. And so there's different board readiness programs that are out there. And it's really important to think about what is going to best match your interests and needs. These are just some useful resources. Of course, we couldn't put all of them on here, but there are some resources for everyone. NACD stands for the National Association of Corporate Directors. So that's a great association to look into. There's also the Private Directors Association and different board leadership programs. For underrepresented groups, we are shamelessly plugging our own program called Board of Advisors, which we'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. And there's also 50-50 Women on Boards programs through KPMG and other companies. And then universities are another place. Not all universities have board readiness programs, but some do. And so when you're thinking about a program that might fit you, you need to think about flexibility. How much time do you have to devote to this program? Are you looking for in-person, virtual? Are you looking just for the content? Are you looking to join a greater community that can support you? So all of these things are different items you want to be thinking about when you're doing your research. The next is using one-to-one executive coaching or cohorts to connect you with networks. So when we thought about, the access to current board members, think about, am I going to be able to, or how am I going to be able to connect with those board members? Do I want to do the work on my own? Do I want somebody else to be doing that work for me? Think about your goals. What do you want to get out of a coaching relationship or a community group? And then your budget for joining this type of situation. Professional assessments, feedback and reviews are another really, really useful tool. So when we think about designing communications like a board bio or an elevator pitch, these can be great tools to dig into for all of kind of the meat and the substance of what we want to make sure we're bringing forward, what we want to make sure our audience understands about the values that we're bringing. And then if you're specifically interested in nonprofit boards, there's just a couple down here. The National Council on Nonprofits is a great resource, and also Board Source. And then we're gonna, as I mentioned, just go through a little bit about, for those interested, Light Her Way, which is the organization that Annette and I co-founded. So our organization, in terms of board readiness, we have a program called Board of Advisors. We do 8 bi-weekly 75-minute-ish virtual sessions through Zoom. So once every 2 weeks, we get on a live Zoom with everyone. We record it. We have our shared resources on a Google Drive, and we really provide curated worksheets, templates, and a pretty comprehensive workbook that we work through. So when Annette mentioned road mapping as an important piece of that, that's what we personally in our program work towards, so that our participants are actually leaving with tangible actions to take, connections they've made in the program, and a supportive network. So for those interested in that kind of an environment, ours is one example of different programs that are out there. We also do have someone who's certified doing an everything DISC assessment, which is a really, really interesting tool. If you don't know or haven't ever done one of these assessments, it digs into the behaviors that you tend to exemplify in the workplace. And we actually do a group debrief, which is, I think, fascinating to see what other people's styles are, so that when you join a board, you're really savvy to understand how you can collaborate effectively with those who have different styles. Coming up April 1st through 3rd, if anyone is, Abby, a big DISC fan. Thank you for mentioning that. We have an Inside Out Leadership, which is a 3-day virtual summit. It is not all day. It is 75 minutes virtually each day for 3 days. We are actually co-hosting that in collaboration with another Emory alum, Natalie Oyster, who's an amazing leadership coach. So it'll be Emory times 3 on that, if anyone is interested. And I see Annette put the link in the chat, and we're happy to answer questions too afterwards. And if you're interested in just getting some knowledge and starting this process, we have a fireside chat series called Illuminate Hers, which is on YouTube. You can grab the link off of our website, and you can see there are some really short clips and some longer episodes, all focused around different topics, all with women, specifically board members across nonprofit, private, and public boards. So some really, really interesting conversations. And finally, we are always happy to talk with anyone, especially an Emory alum, who has questions or is just trying to navigate what's the right next step for them. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we have a couple of links that Annette's just going to put up on our last slide here, which I think are also in the chat. But we just wanted to thank everyone really for coming here, spending time with us, and please connect with us. We have a LinkedIn group. We offer different resources, reports, and information about board work. So if you're curious, come and join us and ask some questions. Thanks so much.
I do see one question from Mitchell. And Liz, do board readiness programs typically help surface board opportunities, or just focused on skill and knowledge building? And that's a great question. It runs the gamut depending on the program. I think in our case specifically, our goal is to identify board positions when possible and make connections whenever we can. However, the crux of our program is to build community of women who are interested in board seats, along with women who are currently serving on boards, to create that network so that when opportunities do come up, they will be made aware of them, but also really laying the foundation of the skills and knowledge that you need in order to feel confident going into submitting yourself for a board position or interviewing if someone else refers you. So as our community grows, there will be more and more opportunities that come up to make those matches, but it's not something that we guarantee or that is our primary focus right now.
Yeah. And there's another question, so we can answer that, which is, can you share more about your board member experience? And why did you join that board? How were we selected? What's the involvement been like? So I can tell you my board experience. So I am the chair of an education committee and on a nonprofit board. I'm also on a communications committee. That's one of the sort of big differences of how boards are set up. So nonprofits may have committees where they take on perhaps more of a tactical approach to committees. And I think for me, that is really why it aligns well with me personally, because I like being able to leverage my experience in that role. I am very aligned to the mission of this particular nonprofit group. I'm also part of an arts advisory panel, and I'm also part of a women's committee for another nonprofit. So I feel that if I'm using my time outside of work and outside of family, at this stage of my life, nonprofit work really works for me, no pun intended, or pun intended. And, it allows me to network with people who have similar values, similar missions, the flexibility of time, the volunteer aspect all work with my, I would say, with what my goals are right now. At a different point in my life, I will probably pursue a paid role, but right now it's not my my personal focus with my time. The way that I was selected was through relationships. I knew the board president and I had conversations. And so, again, relationships matter. And that's how I was able to get that position. Annette, do you want to speak a little bit about your work?
Sure. Yeah. So I've served on several boards, and the one that I would say is the most formal and that takes the most of my time is my position as a trustee on the International Coaching Federation Board. And it is very structured, and governance is very regulated on that board. And so it is a nonprofit unpaid position. There are perks, like we have an international board meeting every year and they fly us to that, which means that we get to connect in person and make big decisions, but we also get to be social with one another. We get to network with other people who, like Samantha said, share our values, are generally in the same industry, and we get to experience a new place and a new culture. So the way that I got onto that board is actually in that 1/3 category where I saw that they had an opening and I applied for it. There was an interview process and it took a little bit of time, but over the course of a few months, I was able to secure the position. And it's been hugely rewarding to be part of the insider circle, knowing, what it is that the Federation as a whole is focused on, where we're going, how we're aligning with different things that are happening in current events and in technology and in, security and whatnot. So that has been awesome. And then being part of an alumni board really is so community oriented and focused on exactly what we're doing here, giving people resources to further their careers, to build their connections, build their community. So that will always speak to me, and that's something that I'll likely always be involved with. And I also can see myself pursuing a paid corporate board position at some point, although much later when I have more time and have a lot more experience on boards under my belt. Thank you for these questions. I don't know if we have time for one more or
I think we might be able to squeeze in one more, but do stick around. I have some important announcements that I'm going to make at the end, so don't hop off just yet. But if we have any more questions, we can take one more.
I don't see any. So why don't we let you do your announcements?
All right. Well, again, thank you guys so much for joining us today and participating in today's session and all the questions. Thank you, Annette and Samantha, for your time. This session does qualify for our Certificate of Attendance program. You'll receive an email with the link to request your certificate, along with a link to complete a short survey. And I'll also include all the resources and links that Annette and Samantha shared, so you guys don't have to worry about digging through the chat for that. So I will share that with you. And then on behalf of the Emory Alumni Association, we want to thank you again for learning with us. As a reminder, we have the Survive and Thrive Job Hacks for Unexpected Career Transitions tomorrow with Mark Mayette. And it'll be right here on Zoom again at 12 p.m. Yes, you do still have time to register if you haven't already. Enjoy the rest of your day.